What if General Grievous survived past Revenge of the Sith Part 3? If you haven't seen the previous parts, then you should do so before continuing. I will link them in the description of this video. In a dark chamber deep within the Imperial Palace, Emperor Palpatine convened a clandestine meeting with his most trusted military strategist and Darth Vader. The growing insurrections led by Grievous and the nascent Rebel Alliance had become too bold, too disruptive. It was time for the Empire to assert its might and quell the rebellious tides once and for all. The Emperor unveiled a multi-pronged counteroffensive, the centerpiece of which was a terrifying new weapon, the Death Star. This moon-sized battle station, capable of obliterating entire planets, was designed to instill fear and compliance throughout the galaxy. But before its ultimate power could be unleashed, the Empire would first test the mettle of Grievous and the Rebel Alliance to measure the true threat they posed. Simultaneously, the Empire deployed one of its most cunning and ruthless military leaders, Grand Moff Tarkin, to spearhead the campaign. Tarkin, a master of psychological warfare and brutal tactics, was given a simple directive: crush the rebellion in its infancy. The counteroffensive began with a series of coordinated strikes against known bases of Grievous and the Rebel Alliance. Imperial Star Destroyers emerged from hyperspace without warning, unleashing torrents of TIE fighters and ground troops. The surprise attacks were devastatingly effective, forcing Grievous and the Alliance to scatter and regroup. Grievous, enraged by the sudden onslaught, realized that his guerrilla tactics would need to evolve. He couldn't face the Empire's might in a direct confrontation and survive. Instead, he began to orchestrate hit-and-run attacks, targeting Imperial supply lines, communication hubs, and isolated outposts. Each strike was a message to the Empire that he would not be so easily vanquished. The Rebel Alliance, meanwhile, faced its own set of challenges. The Imperial counteroffensive had disrupted their plans and communication, leading to confusion and losses. But from this Crucible of Fire, new leaders began to emerge, voices that united the scattered cells with a renewed sense of purpose and strategy. They started coordinating their efforts more effectively, striking in places where the Empire's gaze was turned elsewhere. As the battles raged on, the galaxy watched with bated breath. Planets and systems were forced to choose sides, knowing that neutrality was no longer an option. The conflict was no longer a series of isolated skirmishes, but a full-scale war that touched every corner of the galaxy. The Death Star, nearing completion, loomed over these events like a dark promise. The Rebel Alliance, aware of its existence through intercepted communications and desperate intelligence missions, understood that its completion would mean certain doom. They began to plan a daring mission to learn more about this superweapon and, if possible, find a way to destroy it. Grievous, too, recognized the existential threat posed by the Death Star. In his own way, he began to seek out weaknesses, information, or technology that could counteract this new terror. His campaign against the Empire became more frenetic and desperate as he understood that time was running out. The Empire's counteroffensive had indeed put both Grievous and the Rebel Alliance on the defensive, but it had also galvanized them. They were no longer disparate bands of rebels, they were a united front facing a common enemy. As the galaxy spiraled further into chaos and war, the stage was set for epic confrontations, unlikely heroes, and battles that would determine the fate of millions. In the shadow of the Empire's ever-watchful eye, Grievous's relentless crusade against the regime took a dark and personal turn. The cyborg general's thoughts became increasingly consumed by a vendetta against the Empire. Grievous's obsession with vengeance began to overshadow the broader objectives of his campaign. The Rebel Alliance, which had grown in strength and influence, watched with growing concern as Grievous's actions became more unpredictable and brutal. His raids, once strategic strikes against the Empire, now left a trail of unnecessary destruction in their wake. In the shadow of the Empire's ever-watchful eye, Grievous's relentless crusade against the regime took a dark and personal turn. The cyborg general's thoughts became increasingly consumed by a vendetta against an imperial figure, the very architect of his mechanical transformation. This individual, a cunning and ruthless scientist once aligned with the Separatists, had betrayed Grievous, handing him over to the Empire to become the twisted hybrid of flesh and machine he was today. Grievous's obsession with vengeance began to overshadow the broader objectives of his campaign. Every strategy, every resource became focused on finding and destroying this one man. The Rebel Alliance, which had grown in strength and influence, watched with growing concern as Grievous's actions became more unpredictable and brutal. His raids, once strategic strikes against the Empire, now left a trail of unnecessary destruction in their wake as he sought any clue that might lead him to his quarry. The breaking point came after a particularly savage attack on an Imperial research facility. Grievous, believing his target to be within, unleashed the full fury of his droid army. The ensuing battle resulted in the facility's utter annihilation and significant civilian casualties. The Rebel Alliance, horrified by the needless loss of life, confronted Grievous in a tense and fiery meeting. The leaders of the Alliance faced grimly with the weight of their decision, denounced Grievous's recent actions. They argued that his personal vendetta was not only costing innocent lives, but also jeopardizing the entire resistance movement. Grievous, his metallic visage impassive, listened in silence. When he finally spoke, his voice was a low growl of barely contained rage. He accused the Alliance of weakness and short-sightedness, of failing to understand the sacrifices necessary to bring down the Empire. The meeting ended in a stalemate, with both sides parting in anger and distrust. The Rebel Alliance began to distance themselves from Grievous, focusing on building a more structured and unified opposition. They sought to rally the galaxy with a message of hope and justice, in stark contrast to the path of revenge and destruction Grievous had chosen. Meanwhile, Grievous, now more isolated than ever, continued his hunt. His forces, loyal only to him, followed their general into the darkness, their campaign against the Empire becoming one of vengeance rather than liberation. The rift between him and the Rebel Alliance grew wider with each passing day, as both sides prepared for the inevitable confrontations ahead. In the corridors of power on Coruscant, the Empire watched these developments with interest. The divide between Grievous and the Rebel Alliance was an opportunity they were keen to exploit. Agents and provocateurs were dispatched to further widen the rift, to turn the two factions against each other and weaken them both. As the ominous shadow of the Death Star loomed over the galaxy, the Rebel Alliance faced its darkest hour. The Empire, with cold precision, had discovered the location of the main Rebel base and decided it would serve as the perfect demonstration of their new weapon's terrifying power. Word of the impending doom spread quickly through the ranks of the Alliance, sparking a frenzy of activity as they prepared for what might be their final stand. In a desperate bid for survival, the Rebel leaders convened. They knew that even with the recently acquired plans of the Death Star revealing a critical weakness, the task ahead was near impossible. The station was heavily fortified, protected by an entire fleet, and the window for a successful attack was exceedingly narrow. To succeed, they would need every ship, every pilot, and every ally they could muster. Reluctantly, the decision was made to reach out to Grievous. Despite the deep rift between them, he commanded a formidable force that could significantly bolster their chances. A small delegation was dispatched to negotiate, to plead for a united front against the common threat. They found Grievous in a remote system, brooding and as relentless in his personal quest as ever. The meeting was tense, filled with accusations and old grievances. The rebels implored Grievous to set aside their differences, to fight together against the Empire, if only for this one crucial battle. They spoke of the countless lives at stake, of the future of the galaxy itself. But Grievous, consumed by his vendetta and disdain for what he saw as the rebels' weakness, refused. The Empire had wronged him deeply, but he would not be swayed by what he considered naive idealism. He had his path, and he would follow it alone. Unknown to both the rebels and Grievous, the Empire had anticipated this very scenario. Imperial spies, having infiltrated the outer fringes of both factions, reported the deepening divide and ensured that no reconciliation would occur. Emperor Palpatine, viewing Grievous's refusal as an opportunity, gave the order for the Death Star to proceed. The Rebel base, a hub of hope and resistance, was now moments away from annihilation. As the Death Star charged its super laser, the Rebels launched their desperate assault. A small fleet of starfighters, led by the Alliance's bravest pilots, darted towards the behemoth, towards the small thermal exhaust port that was their one chance at salvation. The battle was fierce and unforgiving. TIE fighters swarmed the attackers, and the Death Star's defenses unleashed a torrent of fire. One by one, the Rebel ships were picked off, their brave pilots meeting fiery ends in the cold expanse of space. Yet they pressed on, driven by the slim hope that their sacrifice might mean something more. As the fight raged on, news of the battle reached Grievous. For a moment, he hesitated. The destruction of the Rebel Alliance could only serve his interests, yet something stirred within him. A flicker of the warrior he once was, a sense of respect for these beings who fought so valiantly against impossible odds. The Rebel Alliance's seemingly impossible victory over the Death Star resonated like a shockwave throughout the galaxy. The destruction of the Empire's fearsome weapon, accomplished by a daring band of fighters, led by the young and courageous Luke Skywalker, ignited a flame of hope in the hearts of oppressed systems far and wide. News of the victory spread quickly, bolstering the rebel cause and encouraging those who had once hesitated to now stand against the tyrannical regime. As the Alliance grew in strength and numbers, so too did its legend. People from all walks of life, from seasoned warriors to ordinary citizens, were inspired to join the fight for freedom. Among these new recruits were some from Grievous's own dwindling forces. They had witnessed the futility of their general's personal vendetta and yearned to be part of a cause greater than themselves. Grievous's army, once a formidable threat, had been reduced to a shadow of its former self, capable only of minor skirmishes that did little to change the tide of the broader conflict. In this time of shifting allegiances and growing momentum for the Rebel Alliance, its leaders extended an olive branch to Grievous once more. They recognized his tactical genius and the value of his forces, despite their reduced numbers. A united front, they argued, would be far more effective against the Empire than continuing their separate campaigns. Grievous, isolated and weakened, received the Alliance's emissaries with a cold, mechanical indifference. The destruction of the Death Star, while a blow to the Empire, did nothing to quench his thirst for personal revenge. His obsession had consumed him, driving away his allies and diminishing his power. Yet, even in his diminished state, Grievous clung to his independence. The idea of joining the Alliance, of becoming a part of something larger, was anathema to him. He had been betrayed too many times, his trust in others eroded to nothing. With a voice tinged with bitterness and rage, Grievous rejected the Alliance's offer. He would continue his fight alone, a lone warrior against the vastness of the Empire. The emissaries departed, their hopes of unity dashed against the unyielding will of the cyborg general. As the Rebel Alliance continued to grow, bolstered by their victory and the influx of new members, Grievous faded into the shadows of the galaxy. His attacks became less frequent, his presence more myth than reality. Some said he had been destroyed, finally succumbing to the relentless pursuit of the Empire. Others whispered that he still lurked in the darkest corners of space, biding his time, waiting for the moment to strike once more. The story of Grievous, the once feared general turned solitary avenger, became a cautionary tale within the Alliance. It was a reminder of the cost of letting vengeance consume one's heart, of the importance of fighting not just with strength, but with purpose and unity. His legacy, a complex tapestry of triumph, tragedy, and unyielding resolve, would endure as a somber reflection on the personal toll of a galaxy at war. As the Rebel Alliance continued its fight against the Empire, strengthened by new hope and determination, the galaxy watched and waited, knowing that the final chapters of this grand saga were yet to be written. The battle for freedom, for the fate of countless worlds, raged on, and heroes and legends were born amidst the fire and darkness of a galaxy in turmoil. Years passed, and the relentless efforts of the Rebel Alliance finally bore fruit. The Empire, weakened by continuous rebellions and internal strife, crumbled under the weight of its own corruption and the unyielding spirit of those it sought to oppress. From the ashes of the old regime, the new republic was born, a beacon of democracy and hope in a galaxy scarred by decades of tyranny and war. The new republic worked diligently to mend the wounds of the galaxy. Worlds ravaged by the conflict were rebuilt, and systems torn apart by political divisions were united under a banner of mutual cooperation and peace. The government was restructured to ensure that the mistakes of the past were not repeated. Power was decentralized, and systems were given a greater voice in the governance of the galaxy. The ideals of freedom, justice, and representation were the cornerstones of this new era. One of the most significant actions taken by the New Republic was the demilitarization of the galaxy. The vast armies and fleets that had once enforced the will of the Empire were dismantled. resources were redirected from war to reconstruction, healing, and exploration. The New Republic sought to foster a culture of peace and diplomacy, where conflicts were resolved not through force of arms, but through dialogue and mutual understanding. Deep in the uncharted expanses of the unknown regions, where the maps of the galaxy fade into mystery and legend, Grievous had indeed survived. In the solitude of this cosmic wilderness, far from the prying eyes of the New Republic, he had bided his time. The cyborg general, once thought to be a relic of a bygone era, had not relinquished his grip on existence nor his desire to leave a mark upon the galaxy. In the shadows of forgotten worlds, Grievous forged a new army, drawing upon the remnants of ancient technology, hidden knowledge, and the resources of the unexplored territories. He built a force of unfathomable strength. Droids of all kinds, from silent infiltrators to towering war machines, were assembled under his command, each imbued with the singular purpose of serving their relentless master. Grievous himself had changed. The years of solitude and preparation had honed his mind and body. His cybernetic enhancements were upgraded with technologies unknown to the wider galaxy, making him more formidable and enigmatic than ever. Yet, despite these advancements, his core remained driven by the same desires that had always fueled him: power, vengeance, and an unyielding will to impose his vision upon the stars. As the New Republic celebrated its era of peace and prosperity, little did they know that beyond their reach a storm was brewing. Grievous, the phantom of the past, was preparing to emerge once more, a specter poised to challenge the fragile peace of the present. His plans, inscrutable and vast, promised a future where he would no longer be a mere footnote in history, but a force that would shape the destiny of the galaxy. And so, as the New Republic looked towards a horizon filled with hope, the legend of Grievous lingered like a shadow at the edge of the night, a reminder that the echoes of the past could still resound in the present, and that the battles fought in the name of freedom and tyranny were never truly over. The end of this chapter was merely the beginning of another, a tale yet to be told. A saga of a galaxy forever caught between the light of its ideals and the darkness of its deepest fears. And in that ongoing story, the name of Grievous would once again be whispered in awe and trepidation, a legend reborn from the ashes of history, waiting to unleash his fury upon the stars. The end, for now.